On the quiet hospital bed beneath the dim, pale light, Tsarina arched her neck back, both hands trembling as they clung to the cold sheet beneath her spine. Her breathing was ragged, heart pounding out of rhythm, her entire body tense beneath the searing heat of Lyle's, lips skimming urgently along her neck, over the bare skin of her shoulder, exposed beneath the thin hospital gown. There was no sound now, but the harsh cadence of their breathing and the friction of skin against skin, mingling with the rhythm of heavy rain just outside the window. He whispered her name. Each syllable sent a fresh shudder through Tsarina's body, every sound igniting her nerves even further. In that moment, every boundary disappeared. Morality, rules, conscience. All of it was burned away under the weight of desire pent up through so many endless nights. Then, suddenly, a noise broke the silence from the hallway outside. Lyle froze, his eyes flashing with fear and longing intertwined. Tsarina clung to him, whispering in desperation, "Don't leave me." But he pulled away, his gaze never leaving her for even a second. The two held their breath, waiting in silence. In that suspended instant, a haunting question pierced through Tsarina's mind. How could she, a mere patient, have fallen into the arms of this cold, distant doctor, only to find herself and everything she knew teetering on the edge of tragedy? The night rain lashed violently against each pane of the hospital windows, leaving long streaks of water that melted into the flickering yellow light on the silent corridor. The clock was nearing midnight. In the last on-call room at the end of the hallway, Dr. Lyle Marner sat alone, his face bathed in cold light, dark eyes reflecting the exhaustion of a man who had endured countless sleepless nights. Files and patient charts were stacked haphazardly before him, but his mind seemed adrift elsewhere. A place haunted by the memory of a woman long gone, a memory that always surfaced whenever it rained. Lyle closed his eyes, letting his head rest on the back of the chair, allowing the steady sound of rain drumming on the glass to blur out the tormenting thoughts. He was used to the solitude of night shifts, the sense of safety and confinement blending together, much like his own life. Still, undisturbed, never a single ripple. A sudden knock shattered the night's silence. Lyle opened his eyes, a faint sense of foreboding stirring within him. He stepped out into the corridor just as a young nurse hurried up, her face anxious. "Dr. Marner, there's an emergency. An ambulance just arrived." Female patient, she fell, a deep wound on her left leg. Lyle nodded, instantly shifting into professional mode. He slipped on his white coat, striding toward the ER, all personal feelings pushed aside, just as he had done for so many years. The ER doors swung open. Beneath the harsh, white lights, Tsarina Vial lay on the stretcher, her whole body drenched. A thin dress clung tightly to every curve, exposing flawless pale skin beneath streaks of rainwater. Her hair hung in wet tangles over her shoulders, lips tinged bluish from the cold. Her wide eyes shimmered with a veil of water, filled with both shock and fear. Lyle paused, momentarily stunned. He'd seen many patients before, but none had ever left him speechless at first sight like this. He gazed into her eyes. There was something strange there, not ordinary fear, but a silent storm brewing, threatening to break. Tsarina clutched a thin blanket, trying to force a polite smile, but unease still ruled her delicate face. He bent down to examine the wound. "What's your name?" "Tsarina Vial." "Any dizziness, headache, or trouble breathing?" She shook her head, her voice trembling, "Just cold, and my leg hurts a little." He gently lifted her dress to check the injury on her thigh. The surgical lamp beamed directly onto her smooth skin, flushed pink from the cold, the deep gash running close to her inner thigh. Lyle's skilled hands moved softly, checking each blood vessel, instructing the nurse to prepare disinfectants, his eyes glancing up at Serena's face. Her eyes closed, lashes trembling, lips biting back the pain. But when his hands touched her, a faint gasp slipped out, nearly drowned in the sound of the rain. The air in the room thickened. Serena struggled to remain composed, but each touch from this cold, distant doctor made her entire body tense up, not only from pain but from another, stranger sensation. It was as if every sense had sharpened, every shiver from her skin reaching straight to her heart. Lyle realized his hands lingered longer than necessary. He pulled the cover back over her with deliberate care, forcing himself to sound calm as he spoke. "I'll have to stitch the wound. It'll hurt a little, bear with me." Serena nodded lightly, her lips pale. He slipped his hand beneath her thigh, the warmth of his palm startling her, but she didn't pull away, only gripped the sheet more tightly. The sound of the needle moving through skin blended with the heavy rain outside. Serena stared up at the ceiling, but her gaze always drifted back to Lyle. The distance between them was so close, she could feel his breath against her neck every time he leaned down. Each of Lyle's movements was careful and professional, but beneath the white coat was a strong body, hands both sure and gentle, veins pronounced under the sterile light, every detail hinting at something dangerous, magnetic. She couldn't remember when her breathing had grown shallow, her chest rising and falling in strange rhythm. Lyle noticed it too, his eyes flickering briefly to the sight of her rain-soaked breasts, barely visible through the thin fabric. For a fleeting second, something burning flashed in his gaze. An invisible current shot through the air, linking two lonely souls in the stormy night. The stitches done, Lyle bent closer than strictly necessary, murmuring softly against her ear. "You're all right now, but you shouldn't go home tonight. I'll keep you here for observation." Serena looked up at him, her eyes shining with a mix of surprise and gratitude. A nurse helped her into a private room. The hallway was awash in pale yellow light, the sound of rain unceasing, creating a misty, cold, yet strangely warm atmosphere. Lyle stood leaning against the door frame, eyes fixed on Serena's slender figure behind the foggy glass. His heart was restless, emotions tangled, guilt and longing, regret and anticipation. Serena sat on the hospital bed, wrapped in a large towel, her gaze lingering on the hallway, the place where the doctor's shadow had just disappeared. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat still unsettled, her whole body cold but strangely alive. That night, every time pain pulsed in her leg, she remembered his eyes, his breath warm on her skin, every accidental touch burning through her mind with desires unnamed. Serena didn't sleep that entire night. Lyle, too, was awake in the on-call room, glancing at the clock, then lifting his head to listen to the rain, his heart in turmoil. He knew he had done his duty as a doctor, but the heat that still lingered in his palm refused to fade. The image of Serena, her rain-soaked skin, trembling lips, and eyes full of secrets haunted him the entire night. He realized, once you started to notice someone, you could never return to cold indifference again. At dawn, as the rain finally eased and weak sunlight slipped through the window, Serena drifted off to sleep, an ambiguous smile on her lips. Outside, Lyle leaned against the wall, eyes closed, wondering if he should allow things to go further or bury whatever had just begun before it took root. But in that vague space between two boundaries, Neither knew that this rainy night was only the beginning of something forbidden, something deeper, longer, and far more dangerous than either had ever dared to imagine. 3 days later, on a damp afternoon when the summer rain still hadn't faded away, Sarina returned to the hospital for her follow-up appointment. Since that night, she had been living in a strange state, half anxious, half expectant. The stitches on her thigh still ached, but the emotions roiling inside her were far more intense than any physical pain. Sometimes, Sarina found herself standing in front of the mirror, lifting her dress to gaze at the crimson scar, her mind lingering on the memory of those steady hands and the somber eyes of the man who had saved her that rainy night. The clinic was quiet that afternoon, filled only with the gentle hum of the fan and the pale gray light falling through the window. Sarina sat in the corridor, fingers lightly tracing her wound. Occasionally, memories of that first night would come flooding back, making her smile without thinking, only for her to quickly hide it whenever a nurse walked by. Today, she had chosen a simple cream-colored dress, modest yet clever in how it revealed her soft shoulders and slender waist. She didn't know if it was unconscious or deliberate, this desire to look more beautiful when seeing Lyle again. The door opened, and Lyle's deep, husky voice pulled her back to the present. "Miss Sarina, please come in." She stood up, trying to steady her breathing as she crossed the threshold. Lyle looked the same as ever, white coat, hair slightly tousled from long hours of work, eyes cool and clouded with fatigue. Yet today, when his gaze met Sarina's, the corners of his mouth twitched in the faintest of smiles, just enough for her to sense the caring hidden beneath that professional mask. He motioned to the examination bed, inviting her to sit. "Is the wound still very painful?" "It's better now, but I just wanted to make sure everything's healing." Lyle nodded, his gaze never leaving her long, elegant legs crossed over the chair. He moved a seat closer, sitting right in front of her, fingers flipping open her medical chart before reaching for a pair of gloves. The distance was so small that Sarina could smell the faint trace of disinfectant mingled with the clean, masculine scent of his soap. His voice dropped, deep and gentle. "I'll take off the bandage and check the stitches. Let me know if it hurts." Sarina nodded, her hands trembling slightly on her thigh, her eyes darting away. Lyle carefully lifted the hem of her dress, revealing the smooth, pale skin that had mostly healed, the pink stitches running close along her inner thigh. Under the lamp, her skin nearly glowed, delicate veins visible just beneath its surface. Lyle's gloved hands were strong yet gentle, slowly undoing each bandage, his breath warm and close on her skin, making Sarina shiver. In that moment, time seemed to thicken. Only the two of them existed in the quiet room. Sarina tried to stay calm, but every brush of his fingers, even the lightest, sent a jolt through her whole body as if an electric current had passed through her. Her pulse raced, thigh muscles tensing, and her breath faltered. Lyle examined the wound, his long fingers gently gliding along the edge of the stitches, moving so close to her most sensitive spot that Sarina instinctively pressed her thighs together. He paused, looking up at her, his gaze so deep that Sarina had to turn away, her cheeks flushed red. He touched her ankle, lifting it slightly to check the area around the wound, his hands steady but impossibly soft, every movement making her imagine how it would feel without the barrier of gloves. "Does it hurt much here?" Lyle asked, his voice lower than usual, his eyes fixed on her lips. Sarina shook her head but bit her lip, her breathing growing quicker. The air between them thickened, every word replaced by lingering glances, brushes of skin and hearts pounding in unison. Tsarina suddenly realized her dress had ridden up far too high, exposing almost all of her thighs. She didn't cover herself, even tilting her body a little as if inviting Lyle's attention. Lyle fought to keep his composure, but his hand trembled slightly as he pressed near her inner thigh. His professionalism was breaking under the weight of pent-up desire. He felt every soft curve beneath his fingertips, caught the scent of her skin mixed with the faintest trace of perfume. They both seemed to hold their breath. One small movement could set everything ablaze. Suddenly, Tsarina squeezed his wrist, saying nothing, only meeting his eyes with a look full of both gratitude and longing. The space between them shrank to just a few centimeters, their breaths mingling, her chest rising and falling, her heartbeat so loud even Lyle could hear it. He let go, stepping back half a pace, forcing his voice steady. "The wound is healing well. I'll schedule a final checkup next week." Tsarina nodded, but her eyes seemed to plead with him to stay longer. She stood, smoothing down her dress, her movements slow, lingering, as if reluctant to leave the heated, stifling air of the room. Lyle spoke softly, almost a confession. "If you need anything, call me, anytime." Tsarina smiled, a moist, playful smile, then left, her light fragrance and the charged atmosphere still lingering. The door closed behind her, and Lyle stood motionless, his hand still trembling, his mind reeling between temptation and duty. That evening, neither of them could focus on anything. Tsarina sat by the window, watching raindrops fall, lost in thoughts of his hands on her skin, while Lyle stayed quietly in the clinic, wondering if what had just happened was an accident, or if he was deliberately letting things go further, bit by bit. After that appointment, their messages grew more frequent, sometimes about the wound, sometimes just light questions full of hidden meaning. Tsarina began living with longing, not for the pain, but for his breath, his touch, his gaze. She knew she was standing on the very edge of something dangerous, but she never wanted to turn back. Lyle, too, lay awake at night, reading their messages over and over, each time remembering the feel of her warm, soft skin beneath his hands, unable to sleep. He knew the line between doctor and patient was fading with each day. But the more he resisted, the deeper he sank into a craving that had been suppressed for so many years. That evening, unable to resist anymore, Tsarina sent Lyle a simple message. "My wound still aches sometimes. Are you free tonight, doctor?" After that message, both knew there would be no turning back. Night descended upon the city beneath a curtain of persistent rain, streaks of water blurring the window glass and reflecting the faint, weary glow of street lamps. In the familiar examination room, Lyle stared at his phone, Tsarina's message still glowing on the screen. "My wound still aches sometimes. Are you free tonight, doctor?" Those words looped in his mind, both innocent and sinful, a silent invitation he couldn't ignore. His hand gripped the phone tightly, thumb brushing the screen again and again before he finally made the call. On the other end, Tsarina's voice trembled, woven with the sound of rain at her window. "I didn't want to bother you, but suddenly I felt anxious, and I realized you're the only one I trust." Lyle drew a slow breath, his voice dropping, steadied by that old, instinctive firmness. "I'll come to the clinic right away. Wait for me, don't go anywhere." Just minutes later, Tsarina was in the treatment room, still wrapped in a sheer pearl-colored nightdress with a long cardigan draped over her shoulders. Her face was pale from the weather, but her eyes shone with a glimmer of anticipation. Her hair hung loose and a little wild, droplets still trailing along her neck, skin flushed with the cold. Lyle looked at her, his feelings tangled. A part of him worried, another part restless, hungry, breathless. Does it still hurt? It's better, but tonight it feels uncomfortable, a kind of ache I can't explain. That answer, vague as it was, only stirred something deeper inside him. A bottomless curiosity, a hunger he hadn't let himself feel in years. He checked the stitches again, this time with no gloves separating his fingers from Sarina's skin. Lyle's fingertips glided directly along the warm inside of her thigh. She lay on her side on the hospital bed, her dress pulled high, soft curves accentuated in the pale blue-white light. The air was thick with silent breaths and lingering glances, each touch, each caress lingering longer than necessary, as if daring themselves to test the limits. Lyle kept his tone steady. Maybe your body is healing too fast. Sometimes the nerves get more sensitive. He leaned in close, catching the scent of her femininity, blending with disinfectant and the heat of her skin. She met his gaze, her eyes unable to hide that pent-up longing. Her lips trembled, her breathing rapid, hands clutching the bedsheet for support. Lyle. Just his name, but it was loaded with everything. Desire and fear mingled. Lyle didn't answer. He leaned closer still, his face just a breath away from her chest, their breathing entwined, the silence between them drawn tight like a net, tightening until neither could escape. Suddenly, Sarina sat up, letting her cardigan slip from her shoulders, revealing the fragile skin beneath her nightdress. Tears shimmered in her eyes, not from pain, but from a desperate need to be touched. Tonight, can I stay here? Lyle paused, reason clashing with instinct every second. If there are any health issues, I have to keep you for observation. A flimsy excuse for both of them. They knew it, but clung to it as if, without that pretense, all their guilt would spill out into the light. Sarina met his eyes, both helpless and challenging. Then, I'll do as the doctor says. The room seemed to contract, thick with barely contained desire. Lyle sat on the edge of the bed, his hand searching for Sarina's. He squeezed it tightly, feeling her pulse beneath the skin, as if the two of them were stepping together across a boundary they could never return from. Sarina leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, breathing shallow, her other hand touching his chest through his shirt. The sensation shattered whatever restraint Lyle had left, his own breathing growing faster as his arms drew her in, crushing her small frame against him. Their lips met, tentative at first, then swiftly hungry and wild, every taboo shattering under the heat of desire pent up for days. Sarina gasped, her fingers tangled in his hair, lips searching hungrily for warmth. Lyle gently pressed her back onto the bed, their bodies tangled in the half-light. Sarina's nightdress slipped from her shoulders, her soft breasts rising beneath his exploring hands. He lowered his mouth, lips tracing the lines of her body, from the delicate collarbones to the warm skin between her breasts. Quickened breathing and soft moans mingled with the beat of rain against the glass. Sarina wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling his solid frame closer, drinking in the warmth, strength, and tenderness that only he could offer. Each time Lyle's mouth drifted lower, Sarina arched toward him, her legs curling around his waist, each movement both urgent and tender, wanting to melt into the man she both feared and longed for with wild abandon. In that moment, only their entwined bodies existed, melting together, the world outside vanishing. Just whispers of names, the sound of skin meeting skin, and the rapid, tangled music of their breath. They loved each other not in the light, but in darkness and rain, where all rules dissolved, where nothing was left but instinct, loneliness, and the craving to be touched to the very core. When it was over, Lyle lay beside Serena, his hand still wrapped tightly around her waist, as if afraid that letting go would mean losing everything. Serena pressed her cheek to his chest, eyes closed, letting every last feeling drift away in the soft fall of rain outside. They lay in silence, listening to the beating of their hearts, neither daring to speak of tomorrow. They knew they had just crossed a forbidden line, and neither was sure if they could ever stop again. After that night, neither of them could return to who they were before. Serena woke early, her body still bearing the traces of passion, the faint red marks along her thigh, the lingering sting in sensitive places, the scent of a man still clinging to her hair, her skin. She sat up in the strange hospital bed, the sheets icy cold, yet the memory of Lyle's arms wrapped around her still burned so fiercely across her back that she hugged herself, desperate to hold onto whatever warmth was left. Lyle had slipped out before dawn, careful to avoid the curious glances of the morning nurses. But he could not take any peace with him, only an ever-growing ache of regret. In the on-call room, he stared at the white wall, haunted by every breath, every wild embrace, every muffled moan from Serena in the dark. His hand still trembled when he recalled the sensation of her skin beneath his fingertips, the softness, the heat, and those moments when she whispered his name like a secret confession. But nothing could remain peaceful for long. That day, Serena received a message from Lyle: "Go home and rest. If anything feels wrong, let me know right away." It was an ordinary message, but both knew it held 100 things left unsaid. Serena read it again and again, her finger trailing across the screen, wondering how a simple, clinical sentence could make her heart flutter so wildly. Days passed, but nothing faded. If anything, guilt and desire only grew more intense, more feverish, as if that night had been only the first step into an addiction with no escape. Serena began finding any excuse to return to the hospital. Sometimes she simply texted Lyle, "My stitches look a little red, could it be infected?" Or, "I slept poorly last night, maybe because of the wound." Lyle always replied succinctly, with precise instructions, but every time Serena showed up at the hospital, his gaze darkened, his eyes lingering a little too long, as if saying 1,000 things he could never voice. They played a cat-and-mouse game, every encounter testing the limits of their restraint. It all reached a peak one afternoon when Serena returned, claiming she felt a stinging pain when walking. The ultrasound room was empty, curtains drawn tight. Lyle bent to check her, his cool hands trembling slightly as they brushed over the almost healed wound. "It's nothing, but don't walk too much," he murmured, his voice rough. Serena smiled, leaned in close, and whispered, "So, what if I just stayed here?" Lyle gripped her hand, gently pulling her behind the curtain. Their kisses were hurried, their touches bolder than before, their breaths blending so completely it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Serena tilted her head back, lips parted to accept it all, as if she wanted to melt into him, forget every rule, every fear. From then on, their meetings became a dangerous game. They would grab each other in the small break room, whisper with their eyes and coded words whenever someone passed by. Sometimes it was just a hand wandering under the table, gliding up her thigh, pulling her dress higher than it should have gone, then letting go in a panic at the sound of footsteps. Their late-night messages, their check-ins, were thick with unspoken, pent-up desire. Once, on a quiet afternoon, Serena sent, "The break room's empty, if you're free." That was all it took for Lyle to rush over, without a second thought. They made love in secret, in the dimness of rooms no one else knew, their moans muffled, their fear of being discovered making everything explode with even greater intensity. Guilt and longing became intertwined, dragging on, but neither had the courage to stop. At night, Lyle tossed and turned, haunted by the memory of Serena's gasping breaths, the way she called his name in the dark. He knew he'd gone too far, crossed the professional line, but every time he saw her, he simply couldn't resist. The very fact that their love was forbidden made every sensation deeper, every ache more unbearable than anything he'd ever known. Serena lived in a constant state of nervous anticipation. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leapt, both joyful and afraid. The deeper she sank, the less she wanted to leave their secret world, where every touch, every glance was a spark setting both heart and body aflame. And then, in the whirlwind of those days, Serena realized she wasn't just addicted to the thrill of secrecy, but to the very man who was breaking every rule with her. As for Lyle, every time he touched her, he wondered, how long until the truth comes out? And if it does, will he dare choose Serena, or will he run from himself, just like every time before? The deeper Serena and Lyle sank into their addiction to guilt and desire, the more careless they became with the world around them. Rushed touches in dark hallways, lingering, burning glances held too long in the corner of the elevator. Even the faint marks left on Serena's neck or shoulders, marks she forgot to hide, all of it began to arouse suspicion. Lyle noticed the strange looks from the head doctor, the seemingly innocent questions from the senior nurse. "You've been working late a lot lately, haven't you? Is something going on?" Sometimes, a younger colleague would whisper to another as Serena arrived. "There she is again, her leg's fine, but she keeps coming back for follow-ups." These small things became a mounting pressure on both of them. Lyle grew quieter, hesitating each time he checked his phone, deleting unread messages, hiding any evidence of contact with Serena. But the more he tried to avoid her, the more powerful his longing became, especially on rainy nights when memories of Serena's skin, her breath, her moans spun relentlessly in his mind, impossible to shake. Serena fared no better. The prying eyes in the waiting room, the casual, cutting remarks from others wounded her deeply. Yet, every time she considered ending it, she remembered the sensation of their bodies tangled together, Lyle's tenderness both in passion and in comfort. The more forbidden the love, the deeper she drowned in it, the more unwilling she became to let go. Everything reached a breaking point one late afternoon when Serena suddenly fell down the stairs in the hospital dormitory. The news reached the on-call room just as Lyle was about to end his shift. "A woman named Serena Vial has just been brought to the ER. Her injuries aren't serious, but she's extremely shaken." Lyle dropped everything and rushed over like a man possessed. He personally examined her, checking every scrape and bruise, ignoring the surprised stares of his colleagues. When Serena burst into tears, he knelt beside her, gently wiping away her tears in full view of everyone. Colleagues began whispering, questions and cryptic messages poured into Lyle. Human Resources summoned him to clarify potential violations of professional conduct. Lyle was suspended pending investigation. Serena, faced with the chaos, withdrew into herself, avoiding all contact with him so things wouldn't get worse. The days that followed left them feeling utterly stripped of everything. Serena lived in fear, in isolation, avoiding every gaze, burying her face in her pillow each night as she remembered Lyle's embrace, her tears soaking the sheets. Lyle lived in pain, shut away in his small apartment, night after night drinking alone, rereading Serena's old messages and deleting them, as if erasing the words could shrink the ache growing inside his chest. Yet desire, longing, and love refused to die out. One night, Serena received an anonymous message. "If you want, come to the old clinic. I'll be waiting tonight." She sat for hours, staring at the words, her hands trembling, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She knew if she went, every last boundary would be crossed for the final time. It could be the end, or perhaps the beginning of a new tragedy. Serena came to the clinic in the deep of night, the rain pouring down just like that fateful first night. Lyle stood under the dim lights, his eyes dark, brimming with loneliness, fear, and longing. No words were needed, they rushed into each other's arms, wild, desperate, as if trying to burn up whatever fragments of their broken souls remained. That night, they loved each other as if it was their last. Lyle's hands glided over every scar, every curve, his lips sealing away every pain life had ever left on Serena's body. She whispered his name, her legs wrapped around his waist, each thrust deep and slow, bodies ablaze in darkness and rain. They wept together, moaned together, clung to each other as if letting go for even a second would mean the end. Afterward, they lay in silence, wrapped in each other's arms, listening only to the rain, to the beating of their hearts, knowing that when dawn came, they might lose everything. But in that moment, there was only the present, no fear, no more hiding. That last night was both a separation and a farewell unspoken, and also a question left hanging for the future. Is there any magic left for those who dare to love with everything they have, even knowing their love is forbidden? Dawn crept slowly behind the old hospital curtains, chasing away the darkness left by the previous night's rain. In the empty room, Serena curled up under a thin blanket, her eyes distant, her mind tangled with 1,000 thoughts. Her whole body still radiated warmth, traces of their wild lovemaking still vivid. Red marks on her skin, the salty taste of tears lingering on her lips, and the restless beating of a heart not ready to let go. Outside, Lyle sat against the corridor wall, his hands clenched tightly together as if trying to hold onto something about to vanish. His eyes were clouded, his face haggard from countless sleepless nights and mounting worries. He knew that this morning could be the end of everything. His career, his reputation, and the forbidden love that had both tormented him and brought him back to life after years of numb surrender. A gentle knock sounded on the door. Serena appeared, wrapped in a robe, hair tousled, eyes moist with tears. She stood before him, and for a long time they both stayed silent, letting the hush speak all that words could not express. "I'm sorry," Serena whispered, her voice hoarse after a night of crying her heart out. "I should have stayed away from you, right from the start." Lyle bowed his head, his hand brushing her cheek, wiping away a tear that slid down her face. "I was wrong, too. But if I could choose again, I'd still want to go with you, even if it's only for a day, a night, or an ending no one would wish for." Serena broke down, flinging herself into his arms, hugging him tightly as if giving both of them the last bit of courage. They knew well that no one out there would ever forgive this love, but neither could forgive themselves for leaving each other now. That day, the whole hospital buzzed with news about Lyle. The board suspended him indefinitely, launching a full investigation. Rumors about the doctor and his patient spread like wildfire. Every time Serena appeared, she was met with whispers, cold stares, and scorn. Sarina decided to leave the city, escaping all the gossip and painful memories. She left Lyle a short letter. "I'm going away, not out of fear, but to keep what's most beautiful between us. If you ever need me, find me someday, when all the pain has faded." The days that followed dragged by in heaviness. Lyle threw himself into volunteer work, trying to find meaning in medicine again, but his heart always drifted back to the woman who had awakened every emotion, every longing, and every guilt in him. A year later, on a sudden rainy afternoon, Lyle received a postcard from a faraway city. On the card were handwritten music notes and a message. "I'm still teaching music, still missing you every rainy night." He could not wait any longer. Lyle packed everything, left the old city behind, taking only one thing with him: the faith in a love that, though forbidden, was real and strong enough to weather any judgment. He found Sarina in a small music room where she sat at a piano, her long hair falling loose, her eyes sparkling with tears as she saw him appear in the doorway. No explanations were needed. They rushed to each other, embracing in the midst of resonant music, under the warm golden lights and the lingering scent of old rain on his coat. Lyle whispered in Sarina's ear, "There are no more rules between us. I've made my choice. I choose you. I choose this love. I choose to start again, no matter what." Sarina clung to him, tears of happiness streaming down, her trembling lips seeking his once more. This time there was no more fear, no more need for excuses. Their love, after all the sleepless nights, the stolen moments, and the restless longing, finally stepped out from the darkness. To live openly, even if it was only in a small room, even if it was only between two people who knew. They had crossed every boundary, simply to love.